picture goes to...
Thank you to Sideshow and Janus. Thank you to Blender. Thank you to my mom and dad. Thank you to my cats and dogs. I'm really moved by the warm reception our film has had, and I hope that it will open doors to independent animation filmmakers around the world. Back soon.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for having me for the second time to talk a little bit about Blender. So I think here a few of you might have heard about Blender. It's this computer graphics content creation software. It's very popular. You can download it online for free, and you can use it to make film animations, a lot of different things we're gonna talk about. And what you see here is a scene from the Flow film. I think you're gonna hear about this film a few times during this event. We have some of the filmmakers also that are joining to talk about the process and how they used Blender for it. And this is a little bit like how a computer graphics software looks like when you use it today. You have this viewport where you try to see as close as possible to your final look, what you want to achieve, and then like all your tools around it. And Blender has been evolving to get to this point for almost 20 years. So it's a long journey that brings us here. And today we are going to talk a little bit about what brought us here, but also like what is in the future, and how do you keep innovating to make these kind of tools stay relevant and to stay useful for everyone. So what is interesting here about this film was that it was done by a very small team. And it was, of course, everybody was very surprised that a film done by such a small group could get such a big resonance worldwide. So this is like in Mexico City, like tens of thousands of people getting together to watch this film. And it's not really about the technology per se, of course. It's about if you have a good story that somehow works and tells a message that, again, resonates with everybody. But what is funny here is like those were pictures of the director that is working on his laptop with his dogs on the film, and it's really fun. And this is like him working on his next film, and he's on a plane on his laptop, and he's just there sitting with his computer, and he's like mocking up what's going to be his next film. And to me, this is what a lot about what Blender is about. That you can just take this tool, put it on your computer, go somewhere, and just work with it, and it's like all fitting within Blender itself. And you can achieve everything within one tool. And that is like extremely powerful because it allows you to start as an individual, and then you can scale up to a smaller or a bigger group of people and then work together. But there is a lot of power in being able to own and control your own tools on your own hardware, on your own devices. So talking about Blender uses, as I mentioned, you might have seen even some of these films have been done with Blender entirely or in part. Blender is used more and more also in the visual effects industry. The Sonic movie was using Blender for the rendering and a lot of the post-vis, so the visual effects process where when you shoot something on the set while you're making a film, and then you quickly want to see if your visual effects are going to work, if what your digital characters are going to look like, what you would expect when interacting with your actors. And they use Blender for that. In Framestore, which is a big VFX house, they've been using Blender for doing a process called VizDev, visual development. So before you actually, get into production and you invest a lot of time and effort and money in building the expensive models for your, final frames of the film, you want to try and get a preview as quickly as possible and as accurate as possible of what you're going to do. And that process is called visual development. And Blender is perfect for that because, again, it covers the entire 3D content creation pipeline. So you can start almost from your concepts and build them up all the way to a final render so that it looks exactly like what you want. And then you can redo the process with a higher degree of quality. But in this case, you have speed and fast iterations. Blender is used for TV series, like dozens of them, like thousands and thousands of episodes have been made using Blender for all sorts of levels of animated TV shows. But it goes really beyond that. We have like a collection of these user stories on the Blender website, and I just want to highlight a couple of them. One is kind of design, like industrial design. In this case, it's a designer that is coming up with ideas for these chains, and she visualizes them in CG with a high quality to really see how they look like before making them. And Blender is used in the games industry for making assets, props, environments, and all sorts of things. This game project, for example, used Blender for like all the asset creation, and it was very, I don't know, you might have heard about this game. This is forensics visualization. So it's a type of visualization that is used to reconstruct, for example, accidents or things that happen, and then you want to review it in court for legal reasons. So you want to recreate what happened in that situation. And Blender is, again, like a very easy tool to use to put together these kind of situations. This is about machine learning, so AI, in a way. Blender used for generating synthetic data for training machines to recognize specific situations or specific objects. Very often it's more convenient to do that with digital models than with real world footage, because tagging content and like identifying content is easier, of course, if you create it synthetically. This is another example of using computer graphics to create scenarios that wouldn't be really plausible or like safe to have in the real world. So here we are simulating train tracks, and we want to train a system to recognize objects that go on a train track. You don't want to do this in real life. You don't want to drop a tree or put a person there. But with computer graphics, you can simulate that, and then you can train a model to recognize those situations. And this is also Blender as a playground, as an environment to test systems for doing AI-based interpolation or animation helper systems. So this is like from Disney Research. They use Blender as kind of the place where then they test and they showcase this kind of technology. So in this case, it's more really about Blender being available and being there for you to do all sorts of experiments and then easily be able to publish and showcase what you're doing. This is medical visualization. So like neural pathways rendering. This is data I/O rendering for, again, in the context of the medical field. Historical reconstructions. So this is also, I think this picture I showed was the last time I was here, but I really love it. Is a reconstruction of the ancient Mexico City. And it's all, this place does not exist. It's based on archaeological information, but then you can really get this high quality visualization that give you a sense almost as if you were there, and you can really learn something about the world where we are in. The automotive industry uses Blender. I know also, of course, that in China, people in the automotive industry use Blender, and it's, again, especially in the early stage of design and the early stage of concept, because you are not so much tied down by the precision, the more industrialized processes. You're more free to explore, and that's what Blender is excellent at. And it's excellent especially because you can build your own tools and your own workflows around it to do specific things, like, for example, automotive design. It's a very, very specific way of thinking and a very specific way of building stuff. And so, like, having the ability to customize the software to do that, it makes it very fun to do. So this says that car design benefits more and more from individuals and companies that come up with their own tools. So coming up with your own tools is important. So Blender is actually more than just software. So it's really a community project coordinated by an organization called the Blender Foundation. And it's primarily funded by donations. And at the core of it, there is the software itself, which is used by millions of people. And it has been worked on and contributed to by thousands and thousands of people. So how does this work? How does this Blender work? And what kind of work happens inside of the project that make it possible, right? We've seen all these things that you can do, but how do you actually make it? So we have this is a little visualization that gives you an idea. There are many ways to see it. So this is an example. So you have the Blender project, and then you have different types of actors that are working around it. One of them is the makers, so people who do development. And these are designers, developers, technical artists, so really people that are hands-on doing stuff. Then you have the people that are more coordinating, facilitating things. So when you have more than 5 people working together on something, usually it's helpful to have someone around that can keep track of what everybody else is doing. And in the case of Blender, it's hundreds of people, so you do need development coordinators, module owners, and project leads. And all this needs to go somewhere in a somewhat consistent direction. And that's what you have this leadership for, with roles such as head of development, of product and operations. This is a little bit the area where I do my job, to try and create a strategy. So what is Blender doing now? What is Blender going to do in the next few years based on what are the industry trends or what do we see happening in the world, and also by looking at what the community does, what people do with the tool. And this is mostly about empowering people. So for Blender, as a community project, it's very important not just to say we want to go there, but to make sure that everybody feels that they can contribute to go there. It's a very important aspect of the open source ethos as well, like to really leave opportunities open for people to take the initiatives and go places. It's not just like you have to go there. It doesn't really work that way when you are a public project. These are some of the tools and the things that we have in place to work on Blender. So there is a developer portal, there is developer documentation. We have a code blog where people share and publish how Blender is developed, and articles, right? Articles about research and things that they're doing, or plans for development. We have the projects.blender.org website. This is the place where people report issues, where people contribute code. They actually literally collaborate together on the software. We host all this stuff ourselves because we find that it's very important to, again, have some sort of control and autonomy on where you build your tools so that actually everybody has access to them. DevTalk is a forum where developers can talk about development topics, and we have a chat, our own chat platform. And one thing that was very important when we were setting up this chat was to make sure that you don't even need to log in to see what is happening. So to really try and make it as accessible, as low threshold as possible to get the information. If you want to participate in a conversation, of course you make an account and log in, but the idea is that you should always just be able to get whatever you want with as little effort as possible. And that's how you make something accessible and inviting and making people feel welcome to it. Blender is organized in modules. That's kind of the gateway to enter and collaborate and connect with people depending on the areas of interest that you have. So there are more general high-level modules, and then there are more feature-specific modules. So this is really the place where people work together. And this is really the working units that make up the software. So in all these different, and this is it, this is, a dozen or so groups of interest that then get together and then work, and that's what becomes, in the end, the software. So if you want to, for example, get involved, or you want to contribute something, and you say, I would love if Blender would do this, the best way to do that is to find your way into a module and understand, how are these people working? What is their roadmap? What are they working on? Why is my feature gonna fit or not within what people are planning to do? So this is the way that we try to advertise and explain as much as possible to people interested in getting involved how to do it. There are like two types of work that are happening within the modules. One is, we call them projects, and one is like more module work. And the module work is mostly what I was saying, maintaining things and developing things within the specific area that is, for example, say modeling or animation or Python scripting and so on. And the other one is more overarching activities. So sometimes they can be little projects that happen entirely within a module, but sometimes it can also be bigger across modules. And these projects, they follow a roadmap. We are not going to really talk a lot about the roadmap today because a lot of the information is online and it's evolving. Otherwise, the presentation lasts 2 hours. But the roadmap is very much about going somewhere and having, again, these visions and these dreams, and then also dealing with the reality of what you can actually do and what your skills are and what your team can do and so on. So that's an interesting question. How does Blender work? How do you pay for Blender? So I want to tell a couple of stories about that because I think it's very interesting. So Blender is free, right? But making Blender is not free. So who pays for it? Some people do. So there's individual funding. So we have a platform called the Development Fund where individuals can just donate and they give a little bit of money. Every year we also do campaigns to try and like make it more visible for people that they can donate. So 2 years ago, like last year we did a campaign called Join the 2%. So we estimated that only 1% of the really, really active users of Blender, they actually pay to support it. So we said, let's double that. We make it 2. So just join the 2%, okay? And we did our campaign, and you can see this is like our one-time donation. So you see this chart, and then there is a little bump. So that's when we did the campaign. And we were feeling relatively good about ourselves, about the fact that, okay, the message works and people are donating. And then, the campaign lasted for a month, and then it ended. And we went home. It was the end of the year. There was the holidays. And during that time, we got this. So it was like even more donations, like way more than we did during the campaign. So I was wondering, what is going on here? Because, that's a lot of activity and a lot of response. And it turns out that somebody on the internet made a video called, "Why is Blender in financial trouble? Why is Blender running out of money?" And then there was this thumbnail that says, "Our fault." So it was basically someone kind of a little bit blaming or making the community feel guilty that they were not donating enough. And this is like kind of messaging and word that as Blender, as a project, we cannot really use, we cannot really communicate this way, but it's so interesting that if you put the information out there about the roadmap, what we want to do and how much we need funding for, then other people can take that information and create their own communication and their own message that might resonate even better than we can ever do. So that's a little bit of a testament to what can happen when you make things available and you have a community of people that are very committed to the cause and to making Blender happen. So next to people, there are more organizations or companies. So that's what we call the corporate or industry funding. So there are organizations out there that they see a benefit and they see an interest in making sure that Blender is great for everyone and to work well on their platform, for example, or that it has strategic value for them to see a tool that is free for everyone to use to create content. Because maybe the content goes on their platform, uses their hardware, and so on. So as you can see, there is like a variety of different organizations that are supporting the project, and there is always more. There is always more coming. It's part of my job a little bit to maintain also some of these relationships, and especially when it comes to some of the companies, it's really been a lot very important to explain the difference between investing in content versus investing in technology. For some organizations, for example, say animation studios or game studios, for a long time, a lot of the value was, the competitive advantage was in the technology itself. So it was really seen that you have to invest a lot in keeping technology proprietary and developing your own edge with technology so that then you can do things that are not possible otherwise. And you're seeing that in the past decade or so or more, that this becomes less and less relevant because there is a lot of open source and a lot of accessible technology that everyone has. And a lot of studios are moving towards opening and sharing some of that to also share the burden of developing and maintaining this technology because it is actually very expensive. And ultimately, it's the same for everyone because what makes the difference, what brings people to a movie theater or to download the game is the content itself. That's what actually sells. And so like slowly, studio executives or like, company leaders, they are starting to understand that it's more about making sure that the team has the tools and then they can develop their own ideas. And that's where you really should invest in. So again, technology now is becoming more and more just the tool for everybody. And the final, way of funding the project is more what we call institutional funding. So that means more making sure that, by developing a public project, we can also get some public money, public funding. A lot of the Blender team is based out in Europe. And in Europe, there are a number of initiatives and a number of funds that are available for projects that, are developed in open source or, projects that have a positive impact on society. And trying to access those funds is a very big challenge. So there is maybe some money, but getting it is hard. And it involves going to places like this. It's like this big palace with like chandeliers and everybody wearing a suit talking and trying to actually find out who has the money to actually then get it into the project. So that's also something that I am investing in. It's a lot about building relationships with people and making our work known. So talking about the state of Blender, just some numbers, because I love to show a little bit of numbers and stats to give a sense of how big things are and how do they work. So in the past couple of years, you see the traffic on the website, this is in millions of people going to the website, just keeps growing. In 2019, that's when Blender really had a big bump, like 20-30% growth. A lot of people discovered that Blender existed and started using it, and ever since it's just like a slow, steady growth. Over 20 million people downloaded Blender last year. And I have three kind of groups here. You see the blender.org website, which is the official place. That's where most of the people get the software from. And then you have Steam and the Microsoft Store. I'm showing Steam because you can see it's like 10 times less. It's like 2 million or something like that. In the Blender software, on the Blender website, we don't really track how people download Blender, what do they do after they download it. We don't really follow people around. But with Steam, if you install Blender via Steam, they do. And so there are some interesting stats that I find from Steam that you can then maybe correlate to the other 20 million people who downloaded Blender from our website. And this is the active users versus the peak concurrent users. So every day, there are like anywhere between like 50 and 80,000 people that are using Blender. And at all times, there are almost 10,000 people using Blender. And this is on Steam. So that's like 10%. You can maybe think that you can multiply this number by maybe 5, maybe even 10. So it's kind of funny to think that on the Steam platform, instead of playing games, people are actually using Blender. And like tens of thousands of people are actually doing that. And another interesting piece of information is about the usage. So where is Blender popular? And you can see that China is up there. So I think that there are a few users here, also in this room, and you guys are part of a percentage. And that's still, 3 countries basically account for almost half of the usage of Blender in the world. And another kind of final piece of information is the extensions platform. So in Blender, we built a platform that is a website where you can connect with Blender to download extensions. So we make it very easy to do that. And because we built that as the Blender project, we do have some information about which users connect to that server every day to use the software. And so that gives you a sense of like some numbers, basically, of how many people use Blender. But I think I need someone to press the button again for me, because otherwise we are not going to go on. Help. I keep pressing. Let's see at some point. All right. So these are the amount of requests that we receive on our website. This is basically, you can see that 200,000, like that's the peak. People every day launch Blender to check for extensions, and these are only the people who opted into this feature. So this is not at all everybody. This is probably just a small percentage. And you can see in the different colors the adoption of the software when we make a new release. So you can see how excited users are when we put out a new version of Blender and then they just go and download it. And you can also see how some versions of Blender, they keep being used throughout for like years, basically, for many months. In this case, the chart is not very wide. But it shows like that some people also are very committed to some work using a specific version of the software, and they keep using it throughout many, many months of time. And yeah, so that's also another interesting thing about this slide is that you see the little peaks. So those are the days of the week. So 5 days, people use Blender a lot more than other 2 days. And this sounds like people are using Blender for doing actual work. So that's interesting to know, right? Because people used to make fun that Blender is just a toy and only amateurs use it. Well, this chart shows me that those people are really serious about using it during the week. So maybe that's actually, they're doing it for work. I showed this chart, I think, last time as well, but it still stays my favorite. It's updated for last year, and it shows the difference between the first response time for when you report an issue in the public backtracker versus how quickly it gets resolved. And this is really a testament, and it's something I'm very proud to show every time because it shows how powerful it is to have a public place where people can report the issues and have an entire community, an entire group of people to be able to help each other out to find solutions. So in yellow, you see the first response time. So you go, you open Blender, you find a problem, it crashes, something doesn't work. And then you go and you report this. So you go on a website, project.blender.org, and you say, I have a problem. How quickly someone from the Blender team or a contributor or someone that is involved will give you a response? How quickly will your issue get acknowledged? And this chart shows that for almost 90% of the cases, in 1 day you get a response. So I don't know if you have experience with other softwares doing this kind of thing, but usually getting a response within a day when you have an issue with your software is not something that is so common. So, but then the next thing is like, how quickly do you get a fix? Like, how quickly do you find out, you know, a workaround or there's an actual solution? And that's what you see in red. And almost half of the issues get resolved within a day or a week. And this is also, like, I find extremely impressive because the reactivity of the community is really incredible. And that is possible, again, is just for numbers. If you put it in a platform where a lot of people are, this is what you can get. And I have often discussions with especially more companies or like businesses that sometimes they ask for preferential treatment. People say, I have an issue, I want to have my private backtracker, the private place where I can report my issues, and I want to get my issues fixed first. And I always show this chart to explain how can you get faster support than this. There is no amount of money you can pay to get faster support than this at scale. Of course, individually you can get a developer to work for you, but if you have a large company, this is very hard to achieve otherwise. And slowly and steadily, I can see that the opinion starts to change and that there is a better understanding for this chart, but it takes many years to show it, so that's why I keep showing it every time. So let's get more towards the topic of, okay, the innovation, right? Like the making new things and making exciting things. So we do a lot of stability-focused work. So, you know, one of the reasons why Blender is popular is because it works very well. It's reliable. And how do you make reliable software? You make releases that focus on that kind of stability. These are called LTS, so long-term support releases. And this is a video that is probably broken that shows how much work goes into making a long-term support release. And that is, like, what is a long-term support release? It's a version of Blender that gets fixes for a period of 2 years. So you can keep using it, and whenever there is like something that doesn't work, the developers fix it. And that makes it like extremely reliable and powerful. There were like other things, but we can skip, and we can talk about the reporting also. Like one of the activities that we do as part of the Blender project is we make sure that everybody knows what we are doing, and we do public reports for this. And there is a report for 2024. So if you go on the Blender website, you can actually find out how all those donations and all the things that I talked about then become Blender development. At this point, as I was saying, like Blender is a very mature software. So how do you make sure that you are not making too conservative choices and that you're not just focusing on this stability topic, but you actually keep the door open for coming up with new things? And what are new things? So here are a couple of examples of new stuff that has been happening in the Blender world in the past like year or so. This is called Clay Pencil, so it's a project that comes from contributors that work on the Grease Pencil project and geometry nodes. So they built this system. So this is not AI, just in case somebody is wondering. These are actual tools that are built within Blender by a technical artist. So this is not something that the developer made. This is something that the technical artist made. What is the difference? Well, here you don't really type code to create these tools. You combine these little logical units that are nodes, so it's node-based programming, where you can actually build a tool that allows you to do this. So you have a grease pencil stroke, so a 2D drawing stroke that generates 3D geometry, which then gets combined and melded together to create these very interesting shapes and to work throughout time. So you can have like this frame-by-frame animation, and you can have this very customizable look on a per-frame basis that allows you to do this kind of stuff that otherwise rigging traditionally would be extremely, extremely hard to do, and this is instead very fun to play with. So it's a completely different angle to creating characters and doing animation. And of course, on the other side, you do have this, this is an example of integrating AI with Blender, so this is like an MCP server. This got viral a few months ago, where somebody just connected a large language model chat to the Blender software. Then you basically can ask, you can communicate with the chat using natural language, and then it creates a bunch of Python operations in the background to drive the software itself. And this is like, you know, again, exploring the different ways of interacting with the software because of its accessible API. This is also another example of using AI within Blender. It's providing input into a model. This is a Comfy UI integration. So this is not something that happens directly with Blender. Blender just generates some data, for example, some depth pass or some object information, and then that gets passed over and used as an input or as a control net for creating renders. And
oh, what's this?
This is another example.
Pencil. Hey, is this yours by any chance?
Thank you so much.
Nice. What are you doing here?
I'm just using Blender on the iPad.
No way.
Yeah.
Holy, is that free?
Oh yeah, it's free and open source, just like Blender. You can learn more about this on code.blender.org.
Super nice. Thank you so much. You're holding it upside down.
So yeah, this is our marketing team making an announcement video. It's not really the marketing team. These are like people that are, these are some of the Blender developers, Dalai and Pablo, that have been together with a bunch of other people exploring the concept of bringing Blender on a tablet. People have been asking for this for a long time. I want to just have Blender on my portable device. How do you do that? So it's not really about the iPad itself. It's about really any device. And how do you change the interface of the software that has been designed for mouse and keyboard to work without mouse and a keyboard? So now all of a sudden you don't have those two things anymore. You only have your fingers and a pen. What does that mean for the user interaction paradigms that Blender is built upon? So this is a lot of research and a lot of experimentation that you need to do. And you often have to look at different ways and break things. And there was very positive reactions. People were very excited about this Blender, for tablet, and they were writing online. And then at the same time, on the online forum of Blender, this is actually this music is, I was listening to a song and I screen recorded, so then I always forget that there is music playing. These are people complaining about why are we choosing to do this instead of fixing the existing issues, instead of doing the things that we should be doing. Instead of like, why are you always trying to innovate and make new things when there are so many things that actually can be improved already in the software without coming up with something completely new? And what made me think, like what I was thinking about this when I was reading all these comments was really that it's a context problem. Like, how do you explain the context where you're doing the different kind of work? And so we need to find a way to label our innovation in a way that it is clear that this is not the only thing we do, but that we need space for. And that's the idea of having a Blender Lab. So Blender Lab is what we call a safe space for innovation. So the goal is to create a space and to have an initiative that we can say, okay, there is no pressure for developing new things. They don't have to go in a new release. It's, again, a place where you can do experiments. Things can go wrong, and they will go wrong, and we know it in advance, and it is public. So the idea is to have this thing, and we actually announced it a few weeks ago, maybe it must be 2 months almost, with a number of projects that we want to put there. So Touch and Pen, you can see it there. There is virtual reality, improvements to the rendering technologies, USD. So there's a lot of topics that do not fit directly into the development path because there is too many unknowns, but we want to be able to explore and to do, and to look at and to share as we develop them. So the idea is that you go on blender.org/lab and you can actually find out what is happening. This is also a way to encourage people to support the development and the new things that we are doing in Blender, knowing where they will go. So this is a little bit of an overview of Blender and what it does and where we go with this topic of innovation. But again, I want to stress once more that Blender is not really about the technology, but Blender is about the people, because this is what actually makes it possible to build these kind of things. This is what makes it possible for us to be together and develop films, develop games, develop products, and develop the software itself. And it is super important that we keep this in mind and that we always treat each other as human beings when we are working together on these kind of things. So thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.